What I'm about to tell you, you never should have heard. 29 years ago, I signed contracts that made me forever silent about what's about to be told. But the men behind me today are all either 6 feet under or no longer give a damn. And in consideration of what was exposed this past June between the Pentagon and using UFO revelations for covering up weapons projects, I feel you have the right to be told what really happened that night at Area 51, what we found on that dusty, flat ground, what they were able to bury in less than a full day, and why to this day my sleep is always fitful. If you like to listen to real military anecdotes like this, please subscribe to our channel. Every day, we will talk about one of these anecdotes to pay respect to the ones who served and to the truths that are usually found among them. My name is Daniel Crawford. I'm 62 years old now, living in a small town in Montana where nobody knows what I used to do. For 5 years in the late 1990s, I worked perimeter security for a defense contractor at Groom Lake. That's the real name. The press calls it Area 51, but we just called it the Lake. I wasn't military. I was a contractor. Former Army MP with a spotless record and a security clearance that took 8 months to process. Before Nevada, I'd spent 6 years at Fort Hood, Texas, pulling gate duty and patrol. I was good at it. Thorough, reliable. The kind of soldier who showed up 15 minutes early and never questioned orders. That's what got me noticed. The recruiter found me 3 months before my discharge. Civilian clothes, dark sedan. Met me at a diner off base. He knew things about me that weren't in my public record. Where I grew up, my father's drinking problem, my mother's death when I was 12. He knew I had no wife, no kids, no real ties to keep me anywhere. "You're perfect for what we need," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a job offer, triple my military pay. Housing provided, 30 days paid leave per year. All I had to do was drive a truck in the desert and keep my mouth shut. I asked what the catch was. "No catch," he said, "just isolation, long shifts, and you can never talk about where you work or what you see." I signed the offer letter that night. The clearance process took 8 months. Polygraph tests, background interviews with people I'd gone to high school with, financial audits, psychological evaluations. They wanted to know everything about me before they trusted me with nothing. When I finally got to Nevada, they gave me exactly 2 pieces of information. First, my sector was North Perimeter, 12 miles of fence line. Second, anything that happens inside that fence stays inside that fence. Forever. The work was simple. Drive the perimeter, watch for civilians, report anything unusual. They told me I'd be bored most nights. They were right. For 4 years and 11 months, I was bored. Most nights I'd see nothing but stars. Sometimes I'd spot headlights on the highway, tourists trying to get a glimpse of the base. They'd turn around when they saw the warning signs. Sometimes they wouldn't, and I'd radio it in. Base would send out the interceptors, black SUVs with no license plates. They'd escort the curious travelers back to the highway with a warning and a story to tell their friends. I saw aircraft sometimes, strange shapes in the night sky, moving wrong, too fast, too quiet, changing direction in ways that shouldn't be possible. But I'd been briefed about that. Experimental technology, need-to-know basis. Don't look too long, don't think too hard. So I didn't. I learned to see without seeing, to notice without noticing, to be present without being aware. It's a skill you develop when your job is to witness things you're not allowed to remember. 4 years and 11 months of that. 4 years and 11 months of perfect service. Not a single incident report, not a single security violation, not a single question I wasn't supposed to ask. I was exactly what they wanted, a ghost who drove a truck. Then came September 23rd, 1998. The shift started like any other. I clocked in at 1700 hours. That's 5 p.m. for those who never served. The desert was already cooling, that sharp drop in temperature that makes Nevada nights brutal if you're not prepared. I wore my standard uniform, black cargo pants, black tactical shirt, body armor, sidearm. Nothing fancy. We weren't soldiers. We were eyes and ears. My sector was North Perimeter, about 12 miles of nothing. Scrub brush, rocks, the occasional coyote. To the south was the main base. To the north was public land, though public didn't mean much when armed guards told you to turn around. I drove a modified Ford F-250, reinforced frame, extra fuel tank, encrypted radio, spotlight that could light up a football field. The truck was my office, my shelter, my only company most nights. The sun dropped below the mountains around 1900 hours. I watched it sink, that brief moment when the whole desert turns orange and you remember why people call it beautiful. Then, darkness came fast, the way it always does out there. My radio crackled at 1922. North 1, this is base. How copy? I picked up the handset. Base, North 1. Lima Charlie. Loud and clear. North 1. Be advised. Flight operations tonight. Maintain position. Do not approach south. That wasn't unusual. They tested aircraft at night all the time. Sometimes I'd see lights in the distance. Sometimes I'd hear engines that didn't sound like anything commercial. Sometimes I saw nothing but felt the ground vibrate anyway. Copy base, North 1 holding position. Affirm, base out. I parked on a ridge about 3 miles from the fence line. Good visibility. Clear view south toward the base. I could see the distant glow of runway lights, maybe 10 miles away. Everything else was dark. I poured coffee from my thermos. Still hot. I'd brought a sandwich but wasn't hungry yet. Nights like this, I'd usually listen to the radio. Not the encrypted one, my personal radio. Some country station out of Vegas kept the silence from getting too thick. At 21:14, my coffee was halfway to my mouth when I saw it. A streak of light, south to north, fast, faster than anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't steady like a plane. It was erratic, tumbling, pieces breaking off in small bursts of orange. I set the coffee down slowly. The object, I don't know what else to call it, continued north, toward me. It dropped altitude as it went, trailing smoke or vapor. The pieces that broke off scattered across the sky like fireworks, but there was no sound yet, too far away. I grabbed my binoculars. Through the lenses, I could see it clearly now. Dark, metallic, irregular shape. Maybe 20 feet across, though distance made it hard to judge. It was definitely falling. Not flying. Falling with forward momentum. Then I heard it. A sound like thunder, but deeper. A rumble that came up through the ground before it reached my ears. The kind of sound you feel in your chest. The object passed overhead. I watched it through my windshield, neck craned back. It was maybe 1,000 feet up, maybe less. Burning. Definitely burning. The pieces that broke off were glowing hot. It continued north, toward the public land, toward the highway. I reached for my radio. Base, North 1. I have eyes on North 1. Stand by. The voice was different. Not the usual dispatcher. Sharper, commanding. Say again, base. North 1. Maintain radio silence. Acknowledge. My hand hesitated on the transmit button. Base, I have visual on an object. Appears to be falling. Heading north toward North 1. You are ordered to maintain position and radio silence. Acknowledge immediately. I swallowed. Copy. Base, North 1, maintaining position. Radio silence. Affirm. The radio went quiet. I sat there for maybe 10 seconds. Just sat there. The sound of the falling object faded north. I couldn't see it anymore. The darkness had swallowed it. Then, in the distance, I saw a flash. Bright white. Brief. Like lightning but concentrated. A single point of light on the horizon, maybe 5 miles north. Impact. I waited for orders. None came. I waited for sirens, for helicopters, for something. The radio stayed silent. At 21:18, I made a decision. I drove north. I knew I wasn't supposed to. I knew what maintained position meant. But something in me, call it curiosity, call it duty, call it stupidity, needed to see what had crashed out there. I turned off my headlights. Just running lights. Enough to see the road, but not enough to announce myself from miles away. The truck bounced over rough terrain. There were dirt roads out here, old mining tracks, but most of them hadn't been maintained in decades. I drove for 12 minutes. At 21:30, I saw the glow. Not fire, not quite. More like heat shimmer. The air itself seemed to be glowing. Orange and red and something else. Something I didn't have a name for. I stopped the truck about half a mile out and killed the engine. The desert was silent. No wind, no animals, nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The ground was still warm from the day's heat, but the air was cold. My breath formed small clouds. I walked toward the glow. The terrain was rough, rocks everywhere, scrub brush that caught on my pants. I kept my flashlight pointed down, watching my footing. The ground was uneven here, ancient lake bed that had dried out thousands of years ago. Cracks in the earth, loose stones that shifted underfoot. Every 20 yards or so, I'd look up to make sure I was still headed the right way. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The air tasted metallic, like licking a battery. My skin tingled, not from cold, but from something else. Static electricity, maybe. Or something I didn't have a name for. The desert sounds had stopped. No insects, no distant coyotes. Even the wind had died. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Each breath seemed too loud, too invasive in the silence. I checked my watch. 21:40. 2 minutes since I'd left the truck. It felt longer. Time was doing something strange out here, stretching and compressing like rubber. My flashlight beam started behaving oddly about 100 yards from the crater. The light bent. Not much, but enough to notice, like shining through water instead of air. I stopped and pointed the beam straight ahead. It curved slightly to the right before straightening out again. I'd never seen light do that before. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, not yet, but from adrenaline. Whatever was ahead of me, my body knew it was significant, dangerous, important. At 21:42, I reached the crash site. The object had hit hard. There was a crater, maybe 30 feet across and 6 feet deep at the center. Dirt and rocks had been thrown outward in a perfect circle, geometric in its precision. Some of the rocks were still glowing, that same strange heat shimmer I'd seen from a distance. But it wasn't heat in the normal sense. When I got close to one of the glowing rocks, it wasn't hot. It was warm, but not burning, like it was radiating energy instead of temperature. I knelt and touched one of the rocks. It pulsed under my fingers. A rhythm, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. I pulled my hand back. The dirt around the crater was wrong too. Normal dirt, when displaced by impact, scatters, creates debris fields, shows direction of force. This dirt looked almost arranged, like it had been placed in concentric circles rather than thrown there. And the color was off. Normal desert dirt is tan, brown, reddish. This dirt had a gray tinge to it, dusty, fine, almost like ash. I stepped to the edge of the crater and looked down, and in the center of the crater was the object. It was bigger than I'd thought, maybe 30 feet long, though it was hard to tell because part of it was buried. The visible portion was maybe 10 feet high, protruding from the earth at an angle. The shape was wrong. Not aerodynamic, not symmetrical. It looked almost organic, like bone more than metal. Curves and ridges that didn't make sense for an aircraft. No wings, no tail section, no cockpit or canopy. Just this elongated form with irregular protrusions that could have been structural or decorative or neither. The surface was dark, black, or very dark gray, but it wasn't smooth. There were patterns on it, geometric patterns, lines and angles that seemed to shift when I moved my head. I'd look at one section and it would be one pattern. Then I'd blink and it would be different. Not like camouflage, more like the patterns were layered. Multiple designs existing in the same space, visible depending on the angle of light or the position of the observer. I stepped into the crater. The slope was steep but manageable. Loose dirt gave way under my boots. I had to half slide, half climb down to the bottom. The descent took maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds where I could have turned around. Should have turned around. But I didn't. At the bottom, the heat was more intense. Not fire hot, but warm enough that I had to unzip my jacket. The air was thick down here. Dense, like breathing soup. Each breath took effort. I approached the object. Up close, I could see more detail. The surface wasn't perfectly smooth. There were imperfections, tiny pits and dimples, scores and scratches, where patterns. This thing had been used, had traveled, had a history. But the material itself was unlike anything I'd ever seen. In 28 years of working around military equipment, I'd touched steel, aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber, Kevlar, ceramic composites. This was none of those. It had the hardness of metal, but the texture of something else. Almost like scale. Like reptile skin, but solid. Cold to look at, but warm to approach. The markings were clearer now, too. They weren't painted on. They weren't etched. They were part of the material itself. Integral. Like they'd been there when the object was made, woven into the structure at a molecular level. I heard a sound, a hum, low frequency, almost below hearing. But I felt it in my bones, in my teeth. A vibration that made me want to step back, made my stomach turn. Made my inner ear protest like I was spinning even though I was standing still. The hum wasn't constant. It pulsed, slow rhythm, the same rhythm as the glowing rocks, the same rhythm as my heartbeat. I realized with a chill that my heart had synchronized with the object's pulse, had matched its frequency without my conscious awareness. I didn't step back. I got closer. The markings covered the entire visible surface. Hundreds of symbols, thousands maybe, all different, all precise, all arranged in patterns that suggested language or code or mathematics or something beyond all three. Some of the symbols were angular, sharp lines and hard corners, like circuit diagrams or hieroglyphs. Others were curved, flowing, almost artistic, organic, and some were geometric. Perfect circles, exact triangles, spirals that drew the eye inward. They seemed to have depth, too. When I looked at them straight on, they appeared flat. But when I shifted my angle even slightly, they gained dimension. Some looked carved into the surface, others looked like they floated above it. It was impossible, optical illusion, but consistent, repeatable. I reached out. My hand was maybe 6 inches from the surface. I could feel the warmth radiating from it now, not heat, energy, pure energy with no apparent source. The vibration was stronger here, making my fingers tingle, making my palm itch. I wanted to touch it, needed to understand what it was made of, what it would feel like, Whether it was real or somehow a projection, a hologram, something my mind couldn't quite process. The symbols nearest to my hand started to glow, faintly at first. A blue-white light that pulsed in rhythm with the hum. Other symbols lit up in response, a cascade of light spreading across the surface like ripples in water. I heard something, not with my ears, in my head. A sound that wasn't a sound, a voice that wasn't a voice, just intention, awareness, like the object knew I was there, like it was responding to my presence. The light grew brighter, the hum grew louder. My heart raced now, no longer in sync but pounding hard, survival instinct finally kicking in, telling me to run, to get away. This is wrong, this is dangerous, this is... Helicopters. My hand was maybe 6 inches from the surface when I heard the helicopters, 2 of them, coming fast from the south, no lights. I only heard them because of the distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting air. I turned and ran. I made it maybe 20 yards before the first spotlight hit me. Bright white light that turned night into day. I froze, hand up to shield my eyes. On the ground. Now! I dropped, face in the dirt, hands behind my head. The helicopters landed. I heard boots hitting ground, multiple sets, running toward me. Hands grabbed my arms, pulled them back. Zip ties, tight enough to hurt. Identify yourself. Daniel Crawford, North Perimeter. I'm friendly. I'm one of yours. Someone checked my ID. I heard voices on radios. My face was still in the dirt. He's verified. Contractor, North Security. The hands released slightly, but didn't remove the ties. Get him up. They pulled me to my feet. I could see now. 6 men, full tactical gear, black uniforms, no insignia, no name tags, each carrying an M4 carbine like they expected a firefight. Behind them, more vehicles were arriving. Trucks, a Humvee, another helicopter landing farther out. One of the men stepped close, older, maybe 45, gray at the temples, calm eyes. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I know. I saw it come down. I thought, you weren't ordered to approach. No, sir. You were ordered to maintain position. Yes, sir. He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded to one of the other men. Cut him loose. The zip ties came off. My wrists were red where they'd been too tight. The man in charge, I never learned his name, gestured toward the crash site. What did you see? I hesitated. Crawford, what did you see? An object. It crashed. I came to investigate. Describe the object. Dark, metallic, strange shape. There were markings on it, symbols. His expression didn't change. Symbols. Yes, sir. What kind of symbols? I don't know. Nothing I recognized. He was quiet for a moment, then, you're going to forget this, understand? Sir, this didn't happen. You didn't see anything. You didn't leave your post. You spent the entire shift on North Perimeter doing your job. I looked past him. The crash site was now surrounded by at least 20 people. Portable lights were being set up. Someone was taking photographs. Others were placing markers in the ground. It looked like an investigation scene, methodical, professional. What was it? I asked. The man's eyes hardened. You're going to forget this happened. I need to know what I saw. No, you don't. He gestured to one of the other men. Get him back to his vehicle. Escort him to base. I want him debriefed and paperwork signed before sunrise. 2 men took me by the arms. Not rough, but firm. They walked me back across the desert to my truck. One of them drove. I sat in the passenger seat. We didn't speak. At the base, they took me to a building I'd never been to before. Concrete. No windows. A single door with a keypad. No signage, no number. Just gray concrete walls and a door that looked like it could withstand an explosion. They didn't walk me through the main complex. Instead, we went around the back, through service roads I'd never seen despite 5 years on the property. past warehouses and bunkers, past areas with additional fencing and warnings I couldn't read from the truck. We pulled up to the unmarked building. One of the escorts opened my door. "Out!" I climbed out. My legs were shaky, adrenaline crash hitting me now that the immediate danger was over. I'd been running on pure survival instinct since the crash. Now, standing in the fluorescent lights of some classified facility, reality was catching up. They led me to the door. One of them punched in a code I couldn't see. 8 digits. The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. Inside was a hallway. White walls, white floor, white ceiling, lighting so bright it hurt my eyes after hours in the desert dark. We walked maybe 50 feet, past 3 other doors, all unmarked, all sealed. At the 4th door we stopped. The escort knocked twice, waited. A voice from inside. "Enter." The room was small, maybe 12 by 12, a table bolted to the floor, 2 metal chairs. The walls were bare, a camera in the corner, red light blinking, a recorder on the table, cassette tape already loaded. A man in civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt, sat in one of the chairs. He had a folder in front of him, thick, at least 50 pages. When I entered, he didn't look up. "Sit." I sat. The escorts left. The door closed with a sound like a bank vault ceiling. We were alone. The man looked up at me for the first time. He was maybe 50, graying hair neatly trimmed, reading glasses on a chain around his neck, wedding ring on his left hand. He looked like someone's father, someone's husband, completely ordinary except for the eyes. The eyes were sharp, calculating, the eyes of someone who'd done this many times before. "Mr. Crawford, I'm going to need you to answer some questions." His voice was calm, almost friendly, like we were having coffee instead of sitting in an interrogation room at 3 a.m. "Am I in trouble?" "That depends on your answers." He opened the folder. Inside were forms, legal documents, pages and pages of text in small print, and something else. Photos. I couldn't see them clearly from my angle, but I caught a glimpse. Aerial shots, thermal imaging, documentation. He clicked on the recorder, spoke clearly. "Interview with Daniel Crawford, security contractor, Groom Lake facility. Date, September 24th, 1998. Time, 03:12 hours. Interviewing officer." He paused. "Classification level prevents identification." He looked at me. "First question. What did you observe tonight at approximately 2100 hours?" I swallowed. My mouth was dry. "An aircraft of some kind. It appeared to be in distress. It crashed north of my position." "Describe the aircraft." "It was dark, moving fast, tumbling, pieces breaking off." "Did you recognize the aircraft type?" "No, sir." "Have you seen similar aircraft before during your time at this facility?" "No, sir." He made a note. "Did you approach the crash site?" I hesitated. He looked up at me. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had. "Did you approach the crash site?" "Yes." "Why?" "I thought someone might need help. Standard protocol for aircraft emergencies." "Your protocol," he interrupted, "was to maintain position and report via radio. Were you given authorization to leave your post?" "No." "Were you given authorization to approach the crash site?" "No." "Were you given any communication from base command regarding the incident?" "I was ordered to maintain radio silence." "And you violated that order." It wasn't a question. I didn't respond. He made another note, longer this time. I couldn't see what he was writing. "Describe what you saw at the crash site." I told him. The crater, the object, the strange shape, the symbols, the heat shimmer, the humming sound. I left nothing out. Every detail I could remember, I gave him. He wrote it all down. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then, he set down his pen, folded his hands on the folder, looked at me with those sharp, calculating eyes. "Mr. Crawford, What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. The object you saw tonight is part of a program that does not officially exist. The information you possess cannot be shared with anyone, not your family, not your friends, not other contractors, no one. Do you understand? What was it? That's not relevant to you. I saw it. I have a right to. You have no rights regarding this information. His voice was calm, but absolute. No anger, no emotion, just fact. You signed a security clearance when you took this job. That clearance included provisions for classified programs. What you saw tonight falls under those provisions. He pulled out the stack of forms, set them in front of me. This is a non-disclosure agreement. It stipulates that you will not discuss, describe, or acknowledge the events of tonight with any unauthorized personnel. Violation of this agreement is a federal crime punishable by up to 25 years in prison and fines up to $1 million. I stared at the forms. There's more, he continued. Your employment here is terminated effective immediately. You'll be paid through the end of the month plus a severance equal to 6 months' salary. Your security clearance is suspended pending review. You will not seek employment with any defense contractor or government agency without prior written authorization. Any attempt to discuss tonight's events with media, law enforcement, or civilian authorities will result in immediate prosecution. You're firing me? We're protecting you and protecting the program. By ruining my career? Your career is intact. You'll receive a neutral reference. The termination will be listed as personal reasons, contract completion. You'll find other work. Many contractors do. He leaned forward slightly. But understand this, Mr. Crawford. What you saw tonight cannot exist in the public sphere. Ever. We're not asking for your cooperation. We're requiring it. What if I refuse? His expression didn't change. Then we have a different conversation. One that involves the FBI, the DOJ, and federal charges for unauthorized access to classified information, violation of security protocols, and potential espionage charges depending on what you choose to say and to whom. Espionage? I'm not a spy. You accessed classified material without authorization. You observed a classified program without clearance. You left your assigned post during an active security event. Those facts alone are sufficient for prosecution. He paused. Or you can sign the forms. Take the severance. Go home. Live your life. The choice is yours. It wasn't a choice. We both knew it. He pushed a pen toward me. Sign the forms. I looked at the camera in the corner, red light still blinking, recording everything. My confession, my compliance, my surrender. What if I don't? Then we have a different conversation, one that doesn't end with you leaving this building tonight. The threat was implied but clear. I could sign and walk away, or I could refuse and, what? Disappear? Be detained indefinitely? Charged with crimes that would put me in prison for decades? I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. How many people have you done this to? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Just watched me with those calm, calculating eyes. I signed the first form, then the second, then the third. 23 pages total, each one a promise to forget, each one a vow of silence, each one another lock on the cage I was building around this memory. When I finished, he collected the forms carefully, aligned the edges, slid them back into the folder, clicked off the recorder. A vehicle will take you to your quarters. You have 2 hours to pack your belongings. A transport will take you to Las Vegas at 0400. You'll be on a commercial flight by 0800. Go home, Mr. Crawford. He stood, extended his hand. I didn't shake it. He lowered his hand. No offense taken, no emotion shown. One more thing, he said, as I reached the door. The object you saw tonight. If it ever comes up in conversation, If someone asks if you've heard of anything unusual in Nevada, your answer is, I worked security at a training facility. It was boring. I saw nothing unusual. That's a lie. That's your life now. Boring, uneventful, forgettable. He opened the door for me. You'll be surprised how easy it becomes to believe it yourself. They drove me to my quarters. I packed. I didn't have much. 5 years of my life fit into 2 duffel bags. At 0400, a van picked me up. No windows in the back. I sat in the dark as we drove. I didn't know where we were. I didn't ask. In Las Vegas, they dropped me at the airport. Terminal 1. The driver handed me an envelope. Your ticket and final paycheck. Have a safe flight. He drove away before I could respond. I flew to Denver. From Denver to Billings. From Billings, I drove to the small town where I grew up. Population 2,300, 1 stoplight, 2 churches, a main street with more empty storefronts than full ones. I stayed with my brother for 3 months while I looked for work. Jimmy was 3 years older than me. He'd never left Montana. Worked at the lumber mill since high school. Married his high school sweetheart. Had 3 kids. Lived in the same house our grandfather built in 1947. He was everything I wasn't. Rooted, settled, content with small-town life. He asked me once what happened in Nevada. We were sitting on his porch, late afternoon. His kids were playing in the yard. His wife was making dinner. I could smell pot roast through the screen door. Contract ended, I said. After 5 years, they just ended your contract? That's how it works sometimes. He drank his beer, watched his kids. You seem different. Different how? Quieter, like something's weighing on you. I didn't respond. Couldn't. The forms I'd signed were very clear about family members. No exceptions. If you ever want to talk, Jimmy said, I'm here. I know. We never spoke about it again. I didn't tell him what happened. I didn't tell anyone. The first few months were the hardest. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, convinced I could hear that humming sound. I'd check the windows to make sure they weren't glowing. I'd step outside just to prove the sky was normal, the stars were still there, nothing was falling. Sometimes I'd drive out to empty fields at night, park and watch the sky for hours, looking for lights that moved wrong, shapes that didn't belong. I never saw anything, just stars and satellites and the occasional airplane with blinking navigation lights. I found work eventually, security for a mining company, then a hospital, then a school district. Nothing special, nothing that required the kind of clearance I used to have. The mining job lasted 18 months. I worked night shift at a copper mine 60 miles from town. 12-hour shifts watching cameras and walking perimeter. It was almost like Nevada, except colder. And there were no secrets worth keeping. The hospital was better. Day shift, decent pay. But I couldn't handle the noise, the constant activity, people everywhere. After 5 years of desert silence, the chaos of an emergency room lobby made my skin crawl. The school district was where I stayed longest, 6 years. High school security, breaking up fights, checking IDs at dances, making sure nobody brought weapons on campus. The kids thought I was weird because I never talked much, kept to myself. The other security guards tried to befriend me at first, but I didn't encourage it. One of them was a veteran, Desert Storm. We'd take breaks together sometimes, not talking, just existing in that comfortable silence that former military understand. He never asked about my service. I never asked about his. We both had that look, that weight. He knew better than to pry. I got married, had 2 kids, got divorced. Her name was Rebecca. I met her at a grocery store. She was a teacher at the elementary school. Kind eyes, patient smile. The kind of woman who could make small talk with strangers and actually seem interested in their answers. We dated for 6 months before I proposed, married 3 months after that. It was fast, but it felt right. She made me feel normal, human, like maybe I could leave Nevada behind and build something new. The kids came quickly. Sarah first, then Michael 15 months later. I was a decent father, present but distant. I'd go to their school events, help with homework, coach Little League, but Rebecca said I was never fully there, always somewhere else in my head. She was right. "What are you thinking about?" she'd ask at dinner. "Work?" I'd lie. "You've been thinking about work for 7 years," she said one night. This was the year 9 of our marriage. The kids were asleep. We were doing dishes together, that mundane domestic routine that should have been comfortable but just felt hollow. "It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated." She dried a plate, set it in the cabinet. "You know what's not complicated? Being married to someone who's actually here, who doesn't wake up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, who doesn't flinch every time a plane flies over." "I don't flinch." "You do. You just don't realize it." That conversation was the beginning of the end. We tried counseling. I couldn't tell the counselor anything real, so we talked about surface issues. Communication, quality time, emotional availability. The therapist gave us homework, date nights, active listening exercises. None of it helped because the real problem was locked in an NDA I'd signed in a concrete building in the Nevada desert. We divorced after 12 years. She got the house, I got weekends with the kids. Fair enough, she was the stable one, the present one, the one who could actually be there for them. The kids asked me once why I was always so sad. We were at the park. Sarah was 11. Michael was 9. We'd just finished feeding the ducks. They were good kids, smart, kind. They deserved better than a father who was only half present. "I'm not sad," I said. "You are, though," Sarah said. "Mom says you have something you can't talk about from before you met her." I looked at her, this perceptive, thoughtful girl who noticed things nobody else did. "Your mom is right. Will you ever talk about it?" "Maybe someday." "When?" "When it's safe." Michael frowned. "Is someone going to hurt you?" "Nobody. It's not like that. It's just complicated, grown-up stuff." They accepted this. Kids do. They trust that adults have reasons for the things they do, even when those reasons don't make sense. But now they're adults themselves. Sarah is 32. Marketing director at a tech firm in Seattle. Michael is 30, high school teacher in Portland. They have their own lives, their own struggles, and they still don't know why their father was the way he was. Maybe they'll read this someday. Maybe they'll understand. Or maybe they'll just think I'm crazy. Another old man with conspiracy theories and stories nobody can verify. Either way, they deserve to know the truth, even if it's too late to change anything. For 29 years, I kept quiet. But this past June, something changed. The Pentagon released a report about UFO sightings. Buried in the report was an admission. They deliberately spread false UFO stories near classified bases to hide advanced aircraft testing. They'd planted fake photos. They'd encouraged conspiracy theories. They'd used civilian confusion as cover. When I read that, something broke inside me. All these years, I thought I'd seen something extraordinary, something that justified the secrecy. But what if it wasn't? What if it was just another weapon, another test flight, another lie wrapped in mystery to keep people like me quiet? I started researching. I found others, former contractors, former military, people who'd seen things at Groom Lake and been silenced the same way I was. Some of them were sick. Cancer, respiratory problems. They blamed it on exposure to classified materials, but their service records were locked. They couldn't get treatment through the VA, because officially they were never there. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm healthy. I'm alive. I can speak. So I'm speaking. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe it was an experimental aircraft. Maybe it was something else. But I know what I saw. I know the fear in those men's eyes when they found me at the crash site. I know the lengths they went to keep me quiet, and I know I'm done being quiet. Whatever crashed north of Area 51 on September 23, 1998, the government doesn't want you to know about it. They buried it. They scrubbed the evidence. They threatened anyone who got close. But they can't erase my memory. I've carried this for 29 years. I've woken up at 3 a.m. thinking about those symbols on that surface. I've wondered if I touched something I shouldn't have. I've questioned whether I'm the only one who saw it. I'm not looking for fame. I'm not selling a book. I'm just an old man who needs to tell the truth before he dies. That night was real. That object was real. And whatever the government is hiding out there in the Nevada desert, it's bigger than they want us to believe. I know what I saw. And now, so do you. I think about that a lot now. The way they moved, the precision. They'd done this before. How many other crashes? How many other witnesses? How many other people signed forms like I did, sworn to silence under threat of prison? The thing is, I've had almost 3 decades to think about every detail. And details don't fade the way they should. I can still see the exact pattern of those symbols. I can still feel the vibration in my chest from that humming. That's not normal. Trauma memories don't work that way. They blur. They change. Mine haven't changed at all. Sometimes I wonder if touching that object or getting close to it did something to me, locked those memories in permanent storage, made them sharper than they should be. There was a moment right before the helicopters arrived when I was standing maybe 3 feet from the surface. The heat shimmer was intense. The hum was getting louder. And I swear I heard something else. Not a sound exactly. More like a voice, not words. Just intention. Like the object was trying to tell me something. Then the spotlight hit me, and it was over. I think about the men who escorted me back, how careful they were not to look at the object directly, how they kept their distance. They'd been trained for this. This wasn't their first recovery. The debrief officer, the man in khakis, he knew exactly what questions to ask, what details to note, what language to use in the forms. This was a system, a protocol. They had it down to a science. How many times had they done this? I tried looking into it once, about 10 years ago. I used a library computer, not my home internet. I searched for crashes near Area 51, found hundreds of conspiracy sites, UFO hunters, true believers, and buried among them occasional mentions of September 1998. One forum post caught my attention, posted in 2001 by someone calling themselves North Watcher. They described seeing lights in the sky north of Groom Lake on September 23, 1998, described how the area was immediately locked down, how sheriff's deputies blocked the roads, how helicopters swarmed the area. They were describing the same night, from the other side, from the public land. I almost responded to that post, almost created an account and confirmed what they'd seen. But I remembered the forms I'd signed, the threats, and I closed the browser. I went back to that library 2 weeks later. The post was gone. The entire thread was gone. The user North Watcher didn't exist anymore. Maybe they deleted their account. Maybe the site just cleaned up old posts. Or maybe someone else was watching too. That's when I realized how deep this went. It's not just about keeping contractors quiet. It's about controlling the entire narrative, scrubbing evidence, making witnesses disappear into the noise of conspiracy theories. Smart, really. Hide the truth among 1,000 lies. Make it impossible to separate fact from fiction. Then anyone who does speak up just looks like another crazy person talking about aliens. Except I'm not crazy. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes, the symbols on that surface. I've tried to draw them from memory. I'm not an artist, but I've tried. They were geometric, precise. Some were angular, like circuit diagrams. Others were curved, almost organic. They seemed to have depth, like they were carved into the surface, but also like they were floating above it. Depending on the angle, They looked different. That's not something we can make. Not in 1998, maybe not even now. And the material itself. I've worked around aircraft my whole adult life. Steel, aluminum, titanium, carbon fiber. I know what metal looks like. This wasn't any of those. It was too smooth, too perfect. No seams, no rivets, no welds. It was like someone had grown it rather than built it. The heat signature was wrong too. After a crash that violent, that object should have been glowing hot. Parts of it should have been melting. But it wasn't. It was warm, but stable. Like it had some kind of internal temperature regulation still functioning. And that humming. I've heard turbines. I've heard reactors. I've heard every kind of engine imaginable. This was different, more resonant, like it was vibrating at a frequency that matched something inside me. When I got home to Montana, I started having dreams. Not nightmares, just dreams. In them, I'm standing at the crash site again. But this time, I touch the surface. And when I do, I understand something important. But the moment I wake up, it's gone. Like trying to remember a word that's on the tip of your tongue. This happened 3 or 4 times a week for the first year. Then, it slowed down. Now it happens maybe once a month. But it's always the same dream, always the same moment. My hand touching that surface, that flash of understanding. Then nothing. My ex-wife used to ask me about the dreams. I told her it was just work stress. She believed me for a while, but over the years, she noticed things. How I'd freeze when helicopters flew overhead. How I'd avoid watching anything about UFOs or Area 51. How I'd change the channel if the news mentioned classified programs. She thought I was paranoid. Maybe I was. Maybe I still am. But paranoia is just pattern recognition when you've seen something real. I joined a support group once, veterans with PTSD. I figured maybe talking to people who understood trauma might help. I never told them the full story, just said I'd witnessed something classified during my service that I couldn't discuss. The counselor said I was suffering from moral injury, that holding secrets goes against our nature as social beings, that humans need to process trauma through sharing, and when we can't, it festers. She was right. It does fester. Every year on September 23rd, I think about calling someone, the FBI, a reporter, a congressional office. Every year, I pick up the phone and then put it down. Because even now, even with the statute of limitations probably expired, even with most of those men likely retired or dead, I'm still afraid. They were so thorough, so professional, so certain that I'd never speak. That certainty came from experience. They knew I wouldn't talk because nobody talks. They've done this enough times to be sure. That's what scares me most. Not what I saw, but how normal it was to them. How routine the cover-up. Like they'd done it 100 times before and would do it 100 times again. How many crashed objects are buried in the Nevada desert? How many witnesses signed those forms? How many people like me are carrying these memories around, afraid to speak? The Pentagon report this June. When I read it, I felt vindicated and betrayed at the same time. Vindicated because it confirmed they'd been lying. Betrayed because the lies were so deliberate, so calculated. They admit to planting fake UFO photos, to spreading false stories, to using civilian curiosity as cover for classified programs. They admit it like it's nothing, like manipulating the public is just part of the job. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm naive for being surprised, but I'm not naive about what I saw. That wasn't a weather balloon. It wasn't a spy plane. It wasn't anything I can explain with earthly technology. Maybe it was ours. Maybe we've got scientists working on things so advanced they might as well be alien. Maybe those symbols were some kind of code. Maybe the humming was just a reactor cooling down. Maybe, I don't think so. I think we found something. Or something found us. And the people in charge decided that information was too dangerous for the rest of us to know. So they buried it, literally buried it in the desert, and they buried us too. Everyone who saw, everyone who knew, buried under NDAs and threats and the weight of secrets we can't share. I'm 62 now. My health is good, but I'm not getting younger. I don't know how many years I have left. Maybe 10, maybe 20 if I'm lucky. But however long it is, I don't want to die with this still locked inside. My brother asked me once why I left Nevada so suddenly. I told him I got homesick. He didn't believe me. I'd never been homesick a day in my life, but he didn't push. Family doesn't always push. Maybe if I'd told him things would be different, maybe the burden would be lighter. But I also might be in a federal prison or worse, because that's the thing about threats. They work best when they're vague. Prosecution could mean anything. 25 years in prison, or an accident, or just disappearing one night and nobody asking questions. I've met enough contractors to know how expendable we are. No uniform, no flag-draped coffin if we die. Just a termination letter and a quiet exit. That man in the polo shirt, the debrief officer, he knew exactly how powerless I was. He didn't need to yell or threaten violence. He just laid out the facts. Sign here or face consequences. Simple. And I signed. Because I wanted to live. Because I had a future. Because I was 28 years old and didn't want to spend the rest of my life in prison for seeing something I wasn't supposed to see. But now? Now I'm old enough to care less about consequences. Old enough to wonder if speaking the truth is worth the risk. The worst they can do is arrest me. And honestly, at this point, I might welcome it. Get it all on the record. Force them to acknowledge it happened. Make them explain why a security contractor is a national security threat just for telling the truth. That's what they don't understand. Silence only works as long as we're afraid. And I'm running out of fear. I've started writing this down, not just this account, everything, every detail I remember, the exact time I saw the object, the location of the crash site as best I can recall, the physical description of the men who detained me, the name of the debrief officer. Wait, I never got his name. Just civilian clothes, just polo shirt and khakis. See, that's how good they are. They gave me nothing concrete to hold on to, no names, no units, no identification. Everyone was just sir or ma'am. Even my termination paperwork just said security clearance revoked, employment terminated. No reason, no signature. They're ghosts, all of them. But I'm not a ghost. I'm Daniel Crawford. I was there, and I remember. So what do I want from telling this story? Validation? Maybe? Justice? That ship sailed decades ago. Truth? I already know the truth. I think I just want someone else to know. I want this recorded somewhere, documented. So if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering wrong, someone can fact-check me. And if I'm right, someone has the information. There are details I left out of the official debrief. Small things, like how the symbols seemed to pulse in a rhythm. How some sections of the object were darker than others, like internal compartments. How the ground around the crater wasn't just displaced, it was fused. Like the heat had been so intense, it melted the sand into glass. I didn't mention those things because they seemed too fantastical, too much like a UFO story. But they were real. I saw them. And the smell. God, I forgot to mention the smell. It wasn't burning metal. It wasn't fuel. It was chemical. Sharp. Like ozone after lightning, but sweeter. Almost pleasant. It hung in the air around the crash site like perfume. These details, these tiny fragments that didn't make it into my debrief, they're what keep me convinced I saw something truly unknown. Because if it was just a crashed drone or experimental aircraft, it wouldn't smell like that. It wouldn't hum like that. It wouldn't have those symbols, unless we're so far ahead of publicly known technology that we're basically building science fiction. Which is possible. I won't rule it out. But even that explanation is terrifying. Because if we have technology that advanced and we're hiding it from our own people, what else are we hiding? What other capabilities exist that the public doesn't know about? Maybe that's the real secret. Not aliens, not UFOs, just the fact that the gap between classified and public technology is so vast that we might as well be living in different centuries. I think about the younger generation sometimes, kids born after 2000. They grew up with smartphones and internet everywhere. They think technology moves fast because they see new iPhones every year. They don't know what's possible, what's being tested in the Nevada desert, what's sitting in bunkers waiting for the right war to bring it out. That object I saw, if it was ours, it's 26 years old now. Obsolete. They've probably got things 10 generations beyond it by now. Things that would make that look primitive. And if it wasn't ours, well, that's a different question entirely. I've thought about driving back, just once, taking a trip to Nevada, driving out to where the crash happened, seeing if there's anything left, any evidence, any mark on the landscape. But I know there won't be. They're too thorough for that. If anything was left, they scraped it up. If the ground was fused, they dug it out and trucked it away. If radiation or chemicals lingered, they monitored and remediated. By the time sunrise came on September 24th, 1998, that crash site probably looked like nothing had ever happened. That's their job. Make things disappear. Make witnesses disappear. Make the truth disappear. They're good at it. But I'm still here, still remembering, still carrying this, and now you're carrying it too. That's all I want, for this to exist somewhere outside my head, for someone else to know, for the record to show that Daniel Crawford, security contractor, saw something on September 23, 1998 that the government doesn't want acknowledged. Believe me or don't. I'm past caring. I know what I saw, and I'll remember it until the day I die. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen something that fundamentally changed how you understand the world? Something that made you question everything you thought you knew? That's what that night was for me. Before September 23rd, I believed in the system. I trusted that classified programs were classified for good reasons. National security, protection, the greater good. After that night, I realized the system isn't built on protection. It's built on control. They don't classify things to keep us safe from enemies. They classify things to keep us ignorant, to maintain the gap between what they know and what we know. Because that gap is power. Knowledge is power. And they've got all the knowledge locked up in facilities like Area 51 while we stumble around in the dark, grateful for whatever scraps they decide to declassify 30 years later. The Pentagon report this June. It declassified information about programs from the 1960s and 70s. 60 years old. They're letting us know about technology that's older than most people reading this. What they're working on now, we won't know about until 2070. 2080. Maybe never. That's the game. Keep the public 2 or 3 generations behind the curve. By the time we learn about stealth bombers, they've got hypersonic drones. By the time we learn about those, they've got something else. And somewhere in the middle of all that, objects fall from the sky. Contractors see things they shouldn't. Forms get signed. Careers end. The machine keeps running. I'm just one small gear that got stuck, made noise, eventually got pushed out. But the machine didn't stop. It never stops. Somewhere tonight, right now, there's probably a security contractor sitting in a truck on some perimeter somewhere, watching the desert, drinking coffee, thinking it's just another boring shift. And maybe it is. Maybe they'll finish their shift, go home, nothing unusual. Or maybe they'll see something. Maybe their whole world will change in the span of an hour. Maybe they'll sign forms they never wanted to sign. Maybe in 29 years they'll be sitting where I'm sitting now, wondering if it's finally safe to speak. I hope not. I hope they get to stay ignorant. Ignorance is easier. But if they're reading this, if they're out there and they saw something too, I want them to know. You're not crazy. You're not alone. What you saw was real. And someday, maybe we'll all get to talk about it without fear. Until then, we carry these secrets, these memories, these truths that nobody wants to hear. We carry them until we can't anymore. And then we speak. This is me speaking. This is my truth. Area 51, September 23, 1998. I was there. I saw it. And now you know.